So first of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the collaborators for the project. So my name is Chandra Kavanagh. I'm the ethics officer for the Health Research Ethics Authority here in Newfoundland and Labrador. And this Mock Research Ethics Board project was initially created by Fern Brunger, who's a professor of healthcare ethics here at Memorial University, and also Sandra Veenstra, who's the ethics director for the Health Research Ethics Authority. So there are two collaborating organizations that are involved in the Mock Research Ethics Board. So the first is the Memorial University Center for Bioethics, which is housed in the Memorial University's Faculty of Medicine. So the Center for Bioethics is actually quite new. There's always been bioethics education that's happened at Memorial University, but for the first time we have an actual center here. There are very few centers for bioethics in Canada, and this is one of the only new ones. There's actually a few that have closed recently. So it's a very exciting sort of step forward for Memorial University and certainly for the Faculty of Medicine. And the other collaborating organization is the Health Research Ethics Authority. So the Health Research Ethics Authority is a not-for-profit agency that oversees all of the health research that happens in Newfoundland and Labrador. So the Health Research Ethics Authority is actually quite unusual when it comes to health research oversight. So in most provinces in the country, a university will have a health research ethics board, or a hospital will have a health research ethics board. But here in Newfoundland and Labrador, we have one organization that oversees all of the health research that happens at any organization in the province. And actually, there's a reason for that. So I'm not sure if any of you online would have heard of the Texas vampires case. But this is an ethical tragedy that happened in Newfoundland and Labrador just a couple of decades ago. Essentially, as you may know, Newfoundland and Labrador has what we call a founder population. So that means that we have a group of people who've been together and marrying one another and having children for a long time with not a lot of outside influence. And so what that means is that we have pockets of genetic disorders in Newfoundland and Labrador that are tremendously rare all over the world, but are really common here. So that makes us an interesting place for researchers to come. And there was a group of researchers from Baylor College who found a rare genetic heart defect cluster in Grand Falls, Windsor, and decided that they wanted to come and study that cluster. Unfortunately, a couple of things went wrong with that project. One was that they hadn't allotted enough time, so that meant that there were some people who the consent process was rushed for them or it was skipped entirely. They also didn't have a good, they were coming from the US and didn't have a good understanding of the literacy rates in Newfoundland and Labrador or the education rates in Newfoundland and Labrador. So the information they were providing, people really weren't understanding it. They thought that if they didn't get this genetic test, they might get sick. They thought that it was going to help them with their health care, and it certainly wasn't meant to do that. And then finally, and perhaps most tragically, the information that was collected from these people would have been able to tell whether or not they were likely to have this genetic heart defect. And that information was never passed back to those individuals. So there were people who would have really benefited from knowing that they had a genetic heart defect who never ever found out. And some people got very sick, and a few even died who would have really benefited from having that information. So after all of that happened, the province decided that any research that was happening in Newfoundland and Labrador, any health research, had to have a local ethics review. And that's how the HREA came to be. So the HREA and the HREB have worked together to create some different programming for the Masters of Health Ethics program here. So the MHE degree program is designed to help students identify the skills that they need to analyze ethical issues in healthcare. There's also a practicum requirement that gives them some practical experience in making health ethics decisions. And so the Memorial University Center for Bioethics and the Health Research Ethics Board came together to try and come up with a good, immersive, practical educational opportunity for these students. So this educational opportunity is the Mock REB. So the Mock REB takes place over 3 hours, and it proceeds as if it were a typical REB meeting. So that's a typical Research Ethics Board meeting, where essentially what we have is an application that describes a health research project. And we have one person who is the primary reviewer who reads that application, presents it to everybody else on the board, and talks to them about whether or not they feel there are any ethical issues associated with the research that's going to happen. So there are different people who need to be present at the Health Research Ethics Board. Those include at least 2 experts in the field, often that's 2 clinicians, a lawyer, an ethicist, a community member. We also have privacy experts, and lots of times we have plenty more people. And so for the mock REB, the students play the role of the ethicist who's presenting the work and talking about some of the ethical issues associated with it. So we provide the students with mock protocols. So this is a mock application for a project that's not real. You'll see here is an example of one of the mock protocols, and the people who created these mock protocols are sort of jokesters, so they're filled with like funny names and things like that, which the students actually found quite engaging. So they're provided with a mock protocol, and there are research ethics issues that are inserted into this protocol that the students are then expected to identify. And one of the interesting things has been not only how good students are at identifying the issues that have been inserted, but we've actually had students who've identified issues that were not inserted on purpose that still might be ethical issues. So it definitely is a way to get students' eyes onto a project and get them thinking about ethics in a really meaningful and practical way. So who are the players who are involved? First of all, we have the MHE students who, as I mentioned, play the role of ethicists. They're given one of these mock protocols, and they're expected to raise the ethical issues that they see with the protocols. There's also the ethics officer of the HREA, so that's me. So I attend and I play the same role that I would play in a regular research ethics meeting. So that is that I provide advice, I answer questions about the TCPS2, and I sort of guide any questions that the people on the board might have. We also have the meeting chaired by an REB experienced MHE faculty member. So this is somebody who may have even chaired actual REB meetings, comes in to be the chair. And then finally, we have graduate student volunteers who play as actors, the roles of lawyer, community representative, clinician, and they're given a copy of the research protocol with comments that say, here's where the clinician would say X, Y, Z, or here's where the lawyer might raise an issue about privacy. So this gives students the opportunity to think off the cuff about some of the issues that they're facing when they're reading these research ethics protocols. So the process is as follows. Essentially, we create an agenda, and that agenda looks exactly like an agenda that we would use for any of our research ethics board meetings. Someone is assigned as a primary reviewer, one of the MHE students, and they have an opportunity to present the protocol, tell us what it's all about, and talk about any issues they have. The chair then invites the mock REB members to contribute, so the person playing the clinician to make the comments the clinician would make. The ethics officer, me in this case, provides guidance, answers questions, and the process continues for 3 different types of protocols. So that includes a full clinical trial, which tend to be very complex. Also a general application, so general kinds of research. And finally, secondary use research. So this involves research where people want to take information that's been collected already, for instance, for clinical purposes like your medical records, and they want to pull information for a secondary research project. And so we discuss all of these and we vote on them as we would at any other meeting to determine whether we accept them, reject them, or whether we have some proposed modifications that we'd like to see. So the mock REB, some of the strengths that have been identified by learners with regard to this project has been education through the use of real-world experiences. Because there are people in the room who actually have experience on REBs, often we will talk about different protocols that we've seen, different issues that we've faced, and how we've dealt with them. And the students found this to be very valuable. There's also the review of key learnings through case studies. So the students prior to the mock REB starting will be doing a lot of theoretical education with regard to making ethical decisions in healthcare. And so now what they get to do is take all of that information, all of that theoretical stuff that they've been learning, and they really get to apply it in the case of these case studies. And as we've seen through numerous different studies on active learning, this is a really effective way to entrench the things that these folks have been learning for the past year. We also saw a lot of mentions of the use of humor to promote engagement, so the fact that there were funny names and funny drug names and all of that kind of stuff, the students actually really responded to that. And finally, the benefits of group learning, so the fact that we're all together in a group discussing with one another the issues that we might have. So this is the same thing that happens at the Research Ethics Board level. So where one person might be responsible for presenting an entire protocol, however, everybody else around the table will have read that protocol as well, will have their own thoughts and feelings about it, and so this is a good way for the students to learn from one another. So the real-world experiences, for example, there were stories that were told by REB members from the faculty and the chair, and this helps to clarify and expand on the learning points, on the things that they've already learned, and entrench those learnings. Case studies, there are a range of issues that are covered by these cases. It offers a thorough review of their key learnings, and also they get to apply those learnings in a creative way. So the humorous pseudonyms for researchers, the labs, the drug names of the protocols made reading the protocols entertaining for students. And the group learning aspect, you can see here an image of our students. The group learning aspect of the discussions, whereby a student would raise an issue another hadn't considered, allowed for cumulative learning that was more in-depth than if students had simply analyzed these protocols on their own and provided, let's say, a worksheet where they identified the ethical issues. So some of the challenges that were associated with this project was student presentations of protocols. They really had to be limited to 15 minutes in order for us to be able to get through all of the protocols. This was kind of a funny learning for us, in part because this is an issue on research ethics boards all the time, that it's difficult for us to get through our agenda because the people who are presenting a particular case end up expanding on it. And so often these cases, they're complex, there's a lot of information to think about. So it was funny to see that the issues that came up on the mock research ethics board were so similar to the issues that come up on the regular research ethics board. Making sure that we allowed for breaks was really important. It is an intensive learning experience, and it can be easy to forget that 3 hours sitting on a mock research ethics board is quite different than 3 hours sitting in a classroom. So making sure that we were allowing for breaks so that people could sort of think about what they had learned and make room to learn more things. And then finally, partner work. Often the protocols are assigned to 2 students as opposed to 1. This can be challenging. We know that partner work can be challenging for a number of different reasons. So one of the ways that we've addressed this is by allowing students to pick their partners, because we found that it makes it easier for those students to work together, to actually get together, to communicate, than when they're assigned partners. And sometimes there's a little more awkwardness when it comes to getting together after class. So one of our favorite quotes from our CEQs that we heard from a learner was, "It was enlightening and fun at the same time. Imagine that." So in conclusion, the student evaluations of the mock REB over a 3-year period indicate that this immersive practicum requirement of the MHE program effectively provides training in research ethics in a manner that's enjoyable to students, and the process of the mock research ethics board supports the interest and engagement of graduate students beyond the MHE program. So I actually presented this not too long ago at a conference as a poster, and one of the things that we really noted there when people were coming up to ask us about this project and how it was working was that this becomes a sort of incubator for future REB members. So not only is this useful insofar as it provides tremendous education to the student, but it's also really useful for us at the Health Research Ethics Authority, because we end up having highly competent, qualified people who know how research ethics boards work and want to come be a part of that process. So if anybody has any questions about this project or how we've put it all together, how it's been working, you can ask me those now online, or you can contact me, and my contact information is right here. And I believe these slides are going to be posted somewhere online.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
All right,
and
great.
I guess the recording as well of the video. So we do have a couple of users online. There's a couple of people there. So I just ask that if you have any questions, you can go ahead and post them, and I can certainly share them with Chandra. I guess my observation is just that it is it's a really great example of experiential learning and applied learning.
Thank you very much.
You know, applying what you're it's a real life example, even though I know it's a mock one, but it's actually simulating, the experience that you would have if you were doing that as an employee somewhere. So I think that I think that students thrive more or are more engaged, obviously, even from the feedback that you got when it is fun and it's engaging and they see the applicability of it transitioning out into the world of work, how it applies to that, right? So I think this is a great example. And I think it's one that can be replicated in many disciplines.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think that there are a number of reasons why it's as effective as it is. So one is that we know with a lot of different disciplines, and so too is the case with health ethics, students are often wondering, well, what can I do next? What can I do with this? And this provides students with an actual example of here is an entire career path that you may or may not have considered thinking about health ethics, and here's how the actual day-to-day of working and living in that career would function. And another thing is that insofar as it's quite new for us, quite new for this area, it's not an entirely new idea. So when I've presented this to other people, lawyers will often say, oh, it's like moot court, And so there are ways, I think, that we can think more generally and in an interdisciplinary way about ways that we can give people these direct kind of experiences, while also taking into account the fact that for instance, in a courtroom, it would be inappropriate to have a bunch of students come to a courtroom. And for us, for the Research Ethics Board, it would be inappropriate to have a bunch of students come in and serve as primary reviewers. However, this gives them the opportunity to be able to do that. It also gives an opportunity to graduate students to really engage with their younger counterparts by playing these different roles as actors and actresses, to play the lawyer or to play the clinician.
I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm assuming that there are none. But the other comment that I just wanted to make was my background is career development, so I'm always very curious about career paths and careers that, again, many of us when we left high school were completely unaware of all the different types of careers that are out there. So when you talked about the ethicist being at the table, what is that their job title to be, and where are they employed? I guess
so often it is, and one of the things that I'll talk to students about are these different kinds of career paths. And I've given presentations before where I've said, when it comes to careers, it's often the case that we know what our mom does, we know what our dad does, we know what maybe our professors or our teachers do, and we don't have any idea what the rest of the people in the world are doing. So there is a sort of job title called ethicist. Often they are professors or clinical ethicists. So there are a number of people who work, for instance, for Eastern Health, let's say. And when a doctor has to make a difficult decision, let's say there's something like a late-term abortion, a mother's life is at risk, the doctor is uncomfortable making the decision themselves, they don't know what the right thing to do is, they'll come to their clinical ethicist to ask them how to make that determination or to have them help make that determination. So those are often the people who sit on our boards. Also, when it comes to employment in ethics, I think that my role as ethics officer is a good example of that, because that's what I do every day in running the Research Ethics Board. The same thing with our ethics director, who is a part of creating this. So I think that a big part of why students are so engaged in this is because they see before them all these different ways that they can make use of their master's degree.
And it's certainly an area that's growing.
That's for sure.
When you talk about even 20 years ago, and I guess there wasn't as much focus on being certain about proceeding with, in this case, health ethics. But I mean, I just think we live in an age where everyone is much more aware, and so I can only see this field increasing, actually.
I think so too, and I notice particularly in the world of privacy. So
Yes.
people are becoming more and more concerned with privacy, especially when we're talking about things like data, digital data. What's the ethical way to make sure that all of that is being kept? How is it ethical to use it? When do you need to get permission? All of those kind of questions are coming more and more to the forefront. So I know that we constantly hear about all of these different career paths where the opportunities are shrinking, but I do feel that this is one area where the opportunities are really growing.
Well, one of the areas that I'm very engaged in is the future of work.
Oh.
And, there's a lot of doom and gloom about the future of work and automation, AI, and jobs disappearing. But the other side of it is that with some jobs disappearing due to technology, there are others that are being created do the technology and do the other things. And this is an example, I think, of a career path that probably wasn't as prominent 2 decades ago, even a decade ago, and will only be one that continues to increase.
I totally agree, and actually one of the biggest employers of ethicists is Google. So they need ethicists for a lot of reasons, and you brought up AI. And so, for instance, if we're thinking about the self-driving car, one of the things that the self-driving car has to do is decide, am I, let's say there's an accident that's going to happen no matter what, and this car has to decide, am I going to kill my owner or am I going to kill the bus full of school children? And so it's ethicists who are doing the work to program the cars to help them to be able to make ethical decisions. Right. Because AI is going to have to make ethical decisions just like human beings do.
Absolutely fascinating. Fascinating field, and I feel even better knowing how the students that are in this type of program are getting the real world experience, and being able to apply what they're learning in the classroom to these types of learning environments. So thank you, Chandra.
Yeah, thank you.
Fascinating. I learned a lot. Thank you. This is just a little thank you from the conference committee.
That's
and
great.
yeah, thanks so much.